Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism, Sunday version. Hope you and yours are all well. Been a heck of a week. Got a lot of things to discuss, from the big streaming cost to the pinching of our whisky and a few parts in between. So let's get the gang in right away, and we'll start down there in the borders. How are you going?
Hi there, Roddy. I'm not actually in the borders at the moment. I'm in Motherwell in a flat. After I've been on a march today around Glasgow, calling for a ceasefire. It was brilliant. There were a few thousand people there, and the anger over Gaza is still continuing and still growing. And it's been pouring down in Glasgow. We all got soaked. We all marched around the city, and it was a really good turnout.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Motherwell. We'll be talking about them later, about the by-election there.
Mm-hmm.
Another one that the apathy party won. Only 20% turned out to vote, but whatever. And up there in definitely, I think she's in Clackmannan, Sarah Eva.
Hello again, Roddy.
How you doing?
Good, thanks. Well done, Yvonne. They used to say a week's a long time in politics, but it seems now that the weeks are flying past. But for goodness sake, don't anybody mention the C word.
Oh, well, I wasn't intended to. Well, we're talking at cross purposes here. I don't know. Up there in Old Ricky, our Lloyd.
How you doing, Roddy? How is everybody?
I'm doing not so bad.
It's
And
nice
of course,
hearing COVID towers.
Yeah, well, I've got a wee bit, feeling a wee bit rough myself here. Got a wee bug, so if I suddenly disappear, folks, don't worry about it. I'll be back. And down there up in North Dakota, in the freezing cold, it's a Coatbridge Cavalier himself, Mr. Boswell.
Yeah, hello everybody. It's good here. Actually, it's unseasonably warm, so we're not frozen quite yet. But it's said there we've been down below freezing and will be again very shortly. And then the record here is like minus 50 something. That includes wind chill. It'll give you frostbite. It'll take the skin off the end of your nose, as my mate found out last winter.
Well, I've got to say it's rather pleasant here in Dubai, but we'll just leave it at that. And we're getting a visit next week from the First Minister. I got an invite through for my son did get an invite for tickets. I'm tempted, but I might get persona non grata stamped in my passport if I went to that one. You never know. But anyway, in heck of a week. So I want to just check before we get started, folks. Is anyone using data transfer? Is your streaming okay? There's not going to be any excessive costs here. Are you all on wireless? Because there's no expense claims coming in here. Yvonne, 11 grand. There's so many questions to ask here. I mean, it's over a year ago, and it's only surfacing now. It's just a disgrace. The whole thing's a mess.
Well, he's thrown his kids under a bus, hasn't he? You're obviously referring to the health minister and his iPad, and it actually reminded me a bit of Jackie Smith, the former Home Secretary, who had claimed on her expenses. And it turned out that she'd been watching Red Hot Dutch or some other porn channel, except she said it wasn't her, and she blamed her husband. And it's a similar sort of thing. Why doesn't anybody just take his flaming iPad and look at the history and find out what it was that they were watching that racked up such a high bill? I don't buy this, it was the kids watching an old film. match. I don't buy that at all. And the only way, you know, when you try and dig yourself out of a hole and you end up in an even deeper hole, and then you blame your kids, this is going to run and run. So he needs to come clean now, and we need to check out his search engine and find out what he's been watching.
Quite well. But here's the thing, Eva. This is, as I say, over a year ago it happened. So he got a bill within a month that said 11 grand. And now he's just sort of fessing up. So he knew then. So, you know, there's no excuse for him. He should have paid it then, taking the punishment. So I don't buy that you wait a year before you start talking about it.
I don't know what the name for this is yet. It'll be something gate, but quite what it is thus far has escaped me. I think the bill is actually for his New Year holiday in Morocco, and the bill spans a couple of Celtic games, which might be why the children are getting the blame. It's not good enough. It's not been good enough from the beginning. I have a teenage child. We've all here had teenagers. We've all been teenagers. And if you go abroad on holiday and you're an MSP, you check your devices with Holyrood before you go, and you're under strict instructions about the SIM that you use and how you organise yourself. And that includes as regards the security and the integrity of the device that you're using. So what we're supposed to believe is that it was only a week past Thursday that Michael Matheson learned from his wife that his sons had been watching football using the iPad to tether and use a hotspot. He didn't know that before then, despite the fact that he had had the bill at that point. He'd known about it for 10 or 11 months. It is beyond belief that that's how events actually unfolded. But even if they did, it means that when he was answering questions about the use of the iPad being his and his alone, and that it was not for personal use, it was for parliamentary or constituency use only, he was not telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And that is the point. Apart from the profligacy of spending 11 grand in a week and expecting the taxpayer to pick up the tab, particularly in days of austerity, the real issue here is trust. And once trust has vanished, it is very difficult to build it back up again. And the trust that the SNP had as a competent government was built up over a lengthy period by Alex Salmond predominantly and the government that he led, because scandals like this didn't happen then. And if anything did go wrong where somebody was caught out, they apologised and matters were resolved ASAP with not just a degree of urgency in terms of limiting the bad press or bad publicity for the party or for the government, but because of the need to have integrity and accountability in public life. And that is what's missing here, that some of these politicians don't seem to actually understand the meaning of the words transparency, accountability, responsibility. So high time that somebody read the Riot Act at Michael Matheson, and I sincerely hope that there are journalists trawling through expenses for all other ministers and MSPs as regards data usage, because if the staff thought that it was okay to pay £11,000 for a week for this fellow, what else is lurking still to be found that others have incurred?
Indeed. I mean, I'm not an MSP. There's no security for me, Phil. The first thing I did when I got on the plane at Glasgow to fly out to Dubai was to switch off my data roaming. First thing I do then is switch on the wireless and look for a wireless connection. That is what everybody should do. You know, why was that not done? It's basic.
Yeah, it's kind of basic, and we won't go on too long about this one, but Michael Matheson and the £11,000 streaming bill, yes, it's simple. As Yvonne says, transparency is required here. Let's open it up, make it public information. What was the charge for? And it should not be a big deal. You're playing right into the hands of those who would critique you by trying to cover up something like this. If you have made a mistake, put your hand up and say, well, I made a mistake, or this happened, I'll pay for it myself. It's simple. Boys streaming footy in Morocco, it happens. But if that's it and it was left on, perhaps, then you should pay for it yourself. And of course, it all depends on the circumstances, because we know what some of these carriers are like. They can be shysters. But no, transparency is required, and draw a line under it and move on. That's what we should be doing here. That's what the SNP should be doing, and what Mr. Matheson should be doing himself.
Yeah, it's not a good look, Lloyd, is it?
It's a terrible look, Roddy. But, the fact of the matter is this throws up two particular questions. The first one is that in the Parliament I served in between 1999 and 2003, there were 3 high-profile resignations. One because a pie was eaten in the canteen. That was Frank McAvity. £500 donation to a leadership challenge by Wendy Alexander resulted in her as a minister having to resign. And finally, Henry McLeish, First Minister of Scotland, required to resign because his office, unbeknownst to him, was sublet from a trade union which provided a donation to Henry's campaign. Those were the rules, those were the expectations between 1999 and 2003, that anyone, irrespective of party, would never bring the Parliament or our country into disrepute over even the most minor issue. Now, the issue here is not the £11,000. The issue here is failure to tell the truth. What makes this drag out and look worse than probably it is, but who knows, because we don't know the detail, is the obfuscation over the entire affair. The simple fact that this is something from a year ago certainly makes me think that the mentality of the current Scottish National Party government is a British mentality. It is the same mentality as the Tories in Westminster. They do not resign anymore. In 1999 to 2003, as I said, with the development of our new politics in Scotland, any hint of scandal whatsoever, and you did the right thing, you resigned. We've now come 20 years, and in 20 years, our politicians are now behaving just as badly as the man who wants his moat cleaned, Suella Braverman paying her parents for her electricity through expenses. And until this is cleared up, trust and respect for politics is in the bin. I never thought I would believe that Michael Matheson, Michael of all people, would behave in such a manner. But I think it's this mentality that's developed in this organisation that has been in power for far, far too long, and they're abandoning.
Yeah. The other one, of course, was David McLeish. He had to resign as leader of the Tory party for taxes. Yeah, so you're right. It is quite disgusting. I think it's had enough coverage. The point is, it has to be mentioned. Just get it sorted out, Michael. Do the honourable thing, and let's move on. The other one is this week, Angus Robertson, who's put out a policy paper suggesting that a vote for the SNP is a vote for joining the European Union. And there will be no referendum, Yvonne. It's just, if you vote SNP, you're voting for the EU. It's wrong. You can't do that. There has to be a referendum, surely. You're mute. Here you go. Another pound, please.
Of course, there does. But of course, once again, the SNP are making promises they can't fulfil, and we've got as much chance of getting back into the European Union as we have of seeing the Pope's balls. It's just not going to happen. And why anybody falls for this nonsense is beyond me. And apologies now in advance if I have offended any Catholics. I didn't mean to. But, this is where you end up with the SNP. They're just morally bereft.
Yeah, I don't know how we get from the EU to the Pope's balls, but only you, Yvonne, only you.
Yeah.
the other thing, Phil, is that, apart from anything else, the SNP are still holding this policy of sterlingisation, where they're going to use the pound. You cannot go into the EU with someone else's currency. I mean, it's just a nonsense.
Yeah, that gets me. I mean, obviously, what Angus is doing, this is ridiculous. I mean, the National even is a newspaper which I don't subscribe to. There was a report by Xander Elliott cited Dr. Ian Hardy, who's a visiting lecturer at Edinburgh Uni for the School of Social Science, Social and Political Science, I think. But the SNP's policy, and he says, the states that of keeping the British pound after independence, would make it much harder to join the EU. And Ian Hardy, this lecturer, said the proposal was to be part of an informal currency union with the rest of the UK after a yes vote was a very rare option for nations to choose because it's ridiculous. He says there's a reason it's a rare option. He told the European Conversations podcast, another one, in October, because when in October the then First Minister, it was Nicola, laid this plan out, right? This is another one of Nicola's cunning plans, more cunning than it's just stupidity. It's idiocy. We can all see it, why she's put it in place. It's almost as if she's deliberately trying to sabotage the independence movement. Go ponder that one, folks. So this was the SNP's policy and currency that was produced in a white paper and published by the government. The idea was to be part of an informal currency union where Scotland continues to use the pound sterling for an indefinite period, but without any say at the central bank or any control over things like interest rates. You can't join. We all know the rules. This doesn't work, and where this idiot policy came from, well, it sounds like it's come from the pen of those at Westminster or those at Whitehall who decided here's another way we can ensure that the movement for independence falls on its face.
Now, Lloyd, the simple fact is that EFTA is the way in, and then surely the ALPA party have said that, for example. EFTA, ISP have said the same. EFTA, and then you have to. But the most important thing is you've got to consult the people of Scotland if they want to go into. I mean, I know I've gone from pro-EU to I'm no longer pro-EU. Things like Catalonia and their behaviour in Ukraine and in Israel has. No, I don't want to be part of that. Surely it has to be a referendum.
Well, yeah, even the European Union requires that. But I mean, the question here is Angus Robertson fit for purpose? And the answer to that, quite straightforwardly, is no, he's not. Now, Angus has never been good on detail, but he's good on slogans. He's good at interpreting polling data to win elections. He's proved that. But what he's not capable of is political thinking. He's not capable of thinking outside the box. Angus constantly thinks in terms of what will put a voter in the polling station, marking an X in the right place on the ballot paper. That's all he truly thinks about. He also has an element of contempt for the electorate and indeed for the membership of the Scottish National Party, because to produce a paper which is so clearly and blatantly incompetent in the terms of European Union law, then he effectively is saying to people, I know better than you because I think you're stupid. That's always been Angus's way of operation. But what's worrying about this, and really, really worrying, is the people of this country are marching in the streets against European Union policy. European Union policy is to allow Israel to continue the genocide in Palestine. The people are marching against that. We have von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, standing absolutely solidly aside the genocidal government in Israel. Everyone across Europe, particularly those in the independence movements across Europe, are now thinking, is the European Union a future for us? And many of them have come to the conclusion that what we need is not a European Union, but we need a Europe of the nations and the peoples, allowing them to express themselves. Why is it unelected individuals like van der Leyen can make statements which when we were members of the European Union, were statements on our behalf as part of the electorate of the European Union. The European Union has nailed its colours to the mast. The European Union is pro-genocide, the European Union is pro-war, and therefore is not the answer to the needs of the people of this country who are marching against war and militarism.
Indeed, these things are all right. Even it's very true what Lloyd's saying. But the other one, which is to look at it, is that this SNP conference, which is meant to be the governing body of the party, they voted for £1 Scots. They didn't vote. They voted against sterlingisation. But the conference has just been ignored. This paper confirms that.
Well, I think, as others have said, the difficulty with Angus Robertson and the SNP and the Scottish Government is that they don't just not listen to their own party, they don't listen to the people in the independence movement either. And although we know that Scotland voted overwhelmingly to stay within the EU, we cannot now, as Lloyd says, take it for granted that a majority of the people of the country would want to be in the EU after independence. What is wrong here is that for whatever reason, and some would suggest these reasons might be sinister, the SNP and Scottish Government are not actually doing what it says on the tin as regards their priorities, because priority number one is attaining of Scottish independence, and the second priority is the furtherance of all Scottish interests. So in respect to the latter, it is not likely that joining the EU will necessarily further Scottish interests when you look at what the EU supports and is up to now. But looking at the first, the primacy of attaining Scottish independence, you don't do that by outlawing and letting down and disappointing some of your support. And there's a fair swathe of the independence movement that would not vote in a referendum on independence or in a general election under a Scotland United ticket if what was on sale or promised after independence was membership of the EU. And this has to be a case of saying, what is Angus Robertson driving at? Is he actually deliberately trying to put people off the question of independence? What the Scottish Government ought to be doing, and the SNP as the biggest party supporting independence know, is they should fulfil the earlier promise from almost 4 years ago made by Nicola Sturgeon to the effect that there would be a constitutional convention. There is no reason for that not to happen now, other than obstinacy and self-interest on the part of the SNP. So if independence is what they want, first and foremost, and it is the priority, then the steps that should be taken are not writing of papers which are to an extent nonsensical and don't follow any particular legislative programme. What they ought to be doing is lifting the phone to Scottish civic and political leaders, getting them all together for that convention and looking at how we can achieve Scottish independence by the quickest, fastest route. And once we have that independence, then we can talk about things like the EU or the monarchy, or how do we get shot a trident but get the biggest bang for the buck, if you like. This tinkering around the edges with guff like this that'll never come to pass. It's nothing but time wasting, and we're paying these politicians a hell of an amount of money for them to sit and twiddle their thumbs and torpedo the movement.
Yeah, it's quite shocking. Another thing, a few weeks ago, Yvonne, we were talking about Sir Keir Starmer, your favourite politician, coming up to take Scotland's oil and gas so he could give a council tax freeze in England, invest in jobs and everything down in England. He's been back this week. Techie, can you stick up the video of our Sir Keir? I've got to say again, Sir Keir Starmer, leader of the Workers' Party, the Labour Party. We've got a wee video of him in Scotland at the Whisky. Or taking the Madam, probably a better way of putting it.
In Scotland, if we were able to come in and form a government, we are working with you, which means long-term planning, means strategic thinking, means sitting down and understanding with you. What are the pinch points then? What are we going to do to try and fix that? We've got a government in Westminster and a government in Scotland that want to be in conflict. That isn't sensible politics, and it's not good for the economy, because actually you want people around the table that want to work with you. If we get the privilege to come into government next year at the general election, that is one of the big changes I want to make, which is partnering and working with people rather than trying to find points of division. Long-term planning, strategic thinking can really help Scottish businesses in Scotland and across the world.
basically what he's saying is we're coming to steal your whisky revenues as well.
Yeah, all I see when I see that man is somebody trampling over the dead babies of Gaza. He, as you know, I'm the Alipur Party's women's convener at the moment. And yesterday I spent some time with Yasmin Qureshi, who is the Labour Party's, or was the Labour Party's shadow minister for women and equality. And she has resigned her position over the ceasefire business and the Labour Party. The Labour Party used to be the party of welfare. It's now the party of warfare under Starmer. And he's lost 10 of his ministers because he refuses to call for a ceasefire. And Yasmin Qureshi is one of them. And if people can't see Labour for what it is, you know, we really have to rise up and fight for our independence and to make the government scared of us. And the only way we can do that is through people power. And if we sit back and let Westminster take over, then Starmer is just going to come up and treat us like his own personal money tree. He's no different to Rishi Sunak. He's going to plunder the oil, plunder our national resources, and he's going after the whiskey. What's he going after next? Porridge? You know, who knows? Nothing, unless it's nailed down. Nothing is safe from Labour or the Tories. And we really, really have to punish them when the general election comes round. It's only a few months away. And we, in Scotland, if we don't rise up and show some flaming resistance to these looters from Westminster, we'll have nothing left.
Correct. So, you know, we know he's going to take the oil, he's going to take the whiskey. The point is, the problem is, you know, Yvonne's right, we've got to stand up because you've got the business party now. And one of them's lit blue and one of them's red. Really, there is no choice for the people throughout the UK. There's a choice in Scotland, and we've got to try and get that back on track. But the likelihood is we're just going to get another business party.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's where it's going. And it comes down to money. It's simple as that. I mean, they were talking about oil, they're talking about whiskey. Why are they talking about these? Because they're big revenue. They're making the political point that what we want is everybody working together for the benefit of the whole country. Now, what they want to do is continue to take what is ours. It's as simple as that. The oil and the whiskey. And whiskey sales generally valued about the 5 or 5.1 billion, if you check out Statista generally. But if you go into the detail on this and understand what's at stake here, folks, the Scottish Whisky Association reported in 2022 that whisky exports were worth about 6.2 billion. It accounted for 77% of the Scottish food and drink exports and 25% of all UK food and drink exports. That's the significance of oil and gas. And the Scottish whisky industry, it provides about 5.5 billion in gross value added to the UK economy in 2018, the latest figures I saw. And more than 11,000 people directly employed in the Scotch whisky industry, and it's protected. You can only buy Scotch from Scotland. It has to be made here, you know. And there's about 42,000 jobs across the UK. Now, there's another one here that are supported by the industry. Why is there 11,000 directly employed in the Scotch whisky industry in Scotland? Only 11,000 when it's Scottish, and yet 42,000 jobs across the UK are supported by the industry. Most of this stuff's shipped out through English ports, and we're getting it's the same as the oil and the two major projects I was working on when the big offices holding 500, 600, 700 engineers were all down in London. And bear in mind, like, the other thing that's significant for the rural economy in Scotland, because of the nature of whisky, a lot of these jobs, there's 11,000 in Scotland, but 7,000 are in rural Scotland. Critical Absolutely critical for these economies and investment in communities across the Highlands and Islands. So we should be making more of this and stop these people stealing what's ours.
Correct. The other thing is, Lloyd, not only are the jobs down there, the tax gets paid down there, you know, which is the other bit that tells us that we're too poor. And actually the revenues are all accounted for and put into the London account.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, Phil touched on it there. Look, Starmer comes to Dundee and talks about Whisky. The Scottish National Party response should have been, he has just highlighted how much money is being torn out of our economy, out of the Scottish economy. That was the platform. Where is the 55 million? Where is the 55 billion? Where are the 42,000 jobs? Why is it that we cannot benefit? The people who make it, the people who, as Phil pointed out, Scotch only comes from Scotland. You know, we're the only people that can make it, but we don't benefit from it. But the Scottish National Party, government, or even elements of the party did not stand up and say, what this man's saying is effectively theft. Imagine what we could do if we had that money to address the issues of poverty, drug addiction, homelessness, lack of housing, improvements to our medical service. All of this going directly into Westminster. And what did we hear from any of the Scottish ministers? Neil Gray, we fully support the Scottish whisky industry. No, you don't, Neil. You fully support the robbery of the Scottish people through our whisky industry by the Westminster government. That's what you support.
Yeah, and most of these appointees to the Scottish whisky industry, Eva, are not Scottish.
Well, I'm delighted that we're talking about this because I'm sure you'll be astounded to learn that whisky is one of my favourite subjects. It's not just my favourite drink. And guess where whisky was first born? Clackmannanshire. Guess what Clackmannonshire's got? The Clackmannanshire Whisky Heritage Trail. Not only that, in April every year in the Town Hall in Alloa, there is a whisky fair. So get your tickets booked for April next year. In addition, John Jameson, who founded Jameson's Irish Whisky, was a Clackmannanshire man who's buried in Clackmannanshire. So the roots run deep. This is nothing but theft. It's all it is. As Phil said, £6 billion per annum and countless jobs. So the campaign should start. We used to say it's Scotland's oil. We used to say it's Scotland's water. I'm damn sure that from today on, with great thanks to Keir Starmer, we should be saying it's Scotland's whisky and that's the way it's going to stay. So people of Clackmannanshire, if you want to keep your whisky in Scotland, get voting for independence, not for Labour.
Here. We've also, of course, gin, which is another one. 80% of all the gins that leave this country come from Scotland as well, which, as everybody knows, is my favourite tipple. But the other thing that happened this week, which was quite disgusting, and really got me, is the British government went to the Supreme Court about their flights to Rwanda, lost the case, and Rishi Sunak says, don't worry, I'll just change the law. We can't change the law about their decision over the Scottish referendum, but they can just change the law about Rwanda so they can get back to their racist policy of taking, illegal immigrants, as they call them. I would call them refugees, and fire them into Rwanda. Disgraceful. Yvonne's catching her, getting her thoughts here.
Right, sorry. Yeah.
You still think about the post balls?
I think that you summed it up perfectly when you said that he's just making up laws to suit himself. And what I've found out today is that there's a company called propertyco.com which shows everyone how to put their taxes into a trust and then refuse to hand over the taxes to the British government. And if you go onto the website, they'll explain it. I'm just looking into it more fully because we're all law-abiding citizens and we should not be paying tax to the British government because the British government is supporting war criminals and sending weapons out to Israel, which are being used on women and children. Now, I don't want my taxes being spent this recklessly, so I'm going to withhold my taxes, and I'll let you know how that works and how I get on with it. But this company called propertyco.com tells you exactly how to do it. You put your taxes into a trust fund that refuses to hand over any money that is going to be used for illegal means, like war crimes. And then after a year, you just take the money back out and you don't pay your taxes. Now, it sounds simple enough. The founder did end up in prison for not paying his taxes, but he's now refined his operation, and it seems like a legal way of teaching this government that they aren't the only ones who can make and break the law, and we should do it. We should be doing it anyway. If we do it in enough numbers, they won't be able to prosecute us all. So let's stop funding this government.
How you got a question about Rwanda, went to Gaza and avoiding tax? It was quite brilliant there, everyone. If we could get back on topic here a bit, Phil. The fact that the British government just choose when they have a law they don't like, they go to court, they lose it, they just change the law. It's quite obscene.
Yes, but it's happening all the time. It has happened since the Tories really got their claws into government, and it will continue to happen. We shouldn't be surprised about this. If it doesn't suit them, they simply change the regulations or change the laws to suit those and those who support the Tories. Notice all of these laws are not helping the working people. There is no socialism in this country. There is no compassion. There's nothing here that should entice ordinary working people to vote for Conservatives or Labour for that matter, and yet we do. Year after year in England, because they don't have a choice. They used to have a middle road that was the Lib Dems. We've talked often about this, about the two cheeks of the same backside. We're becoming Americanised in the American system, and there's no difference between policy. So it should be no surprise. If they don't like the law, they simply change it. And it's appalling, especially around this obscenity of sending people to Rwanda who are under desperate circumstances, and some of the instances that have been cited are horrific, and we're sending people to a country. I mean, and what are the Rwandans thinking? Do you know what? I would hold the Rwandans in higher esteem than probably the British government that try to send them there. It's a slap in the face for the Rwandans. I'm sure somebody's making some money out of this somewhere, because that's usually why these things work the way they do.
Yeah,
it's appalling.
Follow the money. Follow the money. Apart from anything else, they're now going to have to get the thing they've always hated, the European Convention of Human Rights. They're going to have to get rid of that if they want to change the law. Of course, that's what the Tories want. They don't want us to have any rights whatsoever. No, and Labour would change it.
This is an ideological crusade by people who represent a very, very tiny minority in this country, but they're ideologically driven. In the same way as Stammer's Labour Party is currently ideologically driven. The Rwanda policy was never going to work. It's not going to happen. But what they're doing is they're using it to break other things. And as you point out, Roddy, the removal of the European Convention on Human Rights, which has nothing whatsoever to do with the European Union, is a product of the Council of Europe, quite a different organisation. Most people tend not to conflate the two, but by doing that, it will give carte blanche in both the financial sector. It will give carte blanche to entrance of private capital into the National Health Service and into all other elements of life. You know, look out for toll roads, look out for, enterprise zones, none of which currently being planned, none of which are compliant with European Convention rules. The Tories have had this idea for a number of years. The Rwanda thing, that's just helping them along the road on their ideological crusade to recreate 19th century pirate mercantile capitalism in the British mould. It's madness. It's utter and complete madness. But the most important thing about it is it will allow them to further deregulate the City of London. And in the end, you look at the cabinet of the Tory party and you look at the shadow cabinet of the Labour Party, they are all in the pockets of the speculators in the City of London. They are dancing to their tune, and unfortunately, the people of England seem to have been caught up in this concept that human rights is a bad thing, that it's something that you need to get rid of because it's human rights that allow the boats to come over the channel. It's human rights that are depriving the poor people of Boston of the right to go and pick potatoes. It's a nonsense. But like many other things at the moment, it's showing the clear division between the belief in humanity that exists in Scotland and the outright despisation of humanity that appears to be the government in England.
The other thing in this, Eva, is that, Suella Braverman, we all saw that letter she put out to the Prime Minister, where she literally called him a liar and he'd broken his promise on Rwanda, etc. This seems to me, it's by him, it's just a knee-jerk reaction. And he's doing it by, he's just going to change the law, get rid of the European Convention of Human Rights, all because of an internal party thing. Just as Brexit was an internal party mess of the Tories. We keep suffering because Tories are always cutting each other's throats.
It's interesting that you mentioned Brexit again there, Roddy, because David Frost, the chief negotiator in respect of Brexit, you remember, was a civil servant who was promoted to become a minister, a cabinet minister. And he commented extensively and in very brutal but revealing terms. And he had said, obviously, pass legislation which says that Rwanda is a safe country. That legislation will exclude the ECHR and the Refugee Convention. And he was asked, but how can MPs vote and say that something is a safe country when the courts have already said that it's not? And he said, the judgment of the courts is the problem. The judges are the problem, not the politicians, not the legislation, but the judges who seek to uphold the law are the problem. And he went on to say that actually it had been a mistake to sack Suella Braverman. She was doing a good job, saying a lot of things that a lot of people in the country agree with and that he needed to be said. But most worryingly, when he was asked, are you worried about the direction of the Tory party? He said, oh yes, we are tilting to the left, to the left. We should be tilting more to conservative policies our voters and the country want. So to try to send people, stop the boats, don't vote for a ceasefire, send folk to Rwanda, that is tilting to the left. No wonder people say that there's very little difference between the Tory party and the Labour Party. And I'm reminded of, you'll remember the guy, the taxi driver that used to video himself in the run-up to the referendum, and he would shout, Scotland, you've got a chance. Run, run, run for your lives. Head for the hills. By goodness, wasn't he right? Yeah,
100% he was right, and he's still right, and we've still got to do it. Another thing that just absolutely flayed me, we've got now, Yvonne, a Minister for Common Sense, Esther McVeigh. They're just gaslighting, they're just taking the piss,
Yeah, they're not interested in democracy. I've spent the last 3 days wading through Nadine Dorris's book, The Plot. And my God, it's all about the corruption that is within the Conservative Party. And they're just playing games. That Rishi Sunak, given a safe seat and being groomed for the top job before he'd even stepped into politics. And of course, he's richer than most people in the country. He's certainly the richest politician in Westminster. You know, he's in the realms of the billionaire class. And this, I wouldn't inflict the book on anybody and say you must read it. But my goodness, it is a sickening eye-opener. The depravity with which the Tory party operates. And Eva's right, you know, run like hell. But we haven't even got our boots on in Scotland yet. We're sitting in some sort of malaise, sleepwalking into a Tory nightmare. And Labour is no better. You know,
No,
when are people of Scotland going to wake up?
Well, that's the worry, everyone. But on that, the Tories announced this week, Phil, that people, the unemployed people who do not are not viewed to be trying hard enough to get a job in England and Wales or in England, are going to have their free dental treatment and free prescriptions removed. Now, two things. One, it's obscene. But here's the other thing: who decides if they're not trying hard enough? Who decides? What's the criteria? It just seems to me it's another way of sticking the boot on the throat of the most vulnerable and the least able to fight back in our society. It's quite disgraceful.
It is, but the clear objective here is the continued privatisation of the National Health Service. So this is the withdrawal of critical, key services to the needy, the most needy. It's inhuman, it's highly Tory, highly Conservative, and it's what the kind of... It all ties in with what we're seeing with Suella Braverman's letter and this new Minister for Common Sense nonsense. I mean, Suella Braverman, there was 4 issues that she came out with calling a line over. The objectives to reduce overall legal immigration or migration. Sorry, stop the boats, as it was mentioned by Eva earlier. The Northern Ireland Protocol on protecting biological sex. And I'll quote from her letter. She said, "You have manifestly and repeatedly failed to deliver on every single one of these key policies. Either your distinctive style of government means you're incapable of doing so, or, as I must surely conclude now, you never had any intention of keeping your promises." That, she just might as well put in giant, luminous red letters, "You're a liar." Because that's exactly what she said. And how she's still in government and how she's still in the party and hasn't the whip removed, I don't know. But Esther McGee, that's another joke. And this is about politics. And for me, I mean, she's returned ITVX. I read their report on this, and she returned to the cabinet for the first time in about 4 years. But now, in fairness, it's an unofficial title of Minister for Common Sense, because she was made minister without portfolio during the Sunak's cabinet reshuffle. But what we understand from this, she used to be a work and pensions secretary, you know, so she held a formidable position. But her appointment was hoped to placate the Tory right. That is a message to the Tory right that we're heading your direction. Don't worry about it. Look at what we're doing. And because of the sacking of Suella Braverman and the nonsense that she came out with, this new woman will be the voice of common sense. So it's all about messaging. And when she arrived, obviously, she says, "It's very good to be back. I'm obviously there to bring back the common sense." It's not common sense. To treat humans inhumanely is not common sense. It's disgusting. And these people... They should not be in office, and and the only reason we are subject to these horrendous policies is because we didn't have the gumption to stand up and stand on our own 2 feet in 2014. By God, we better not miss the next opportunity.
No, we better not. Well, while we're on it, just to highlight that the two cheeks of the same arse, the Labour Party and the Tory Party. Techie, can you stick up Liz Kendall, who's the shadow health secretary? What she's saying about this Tory policy. Is she going to reject it? Is she going to repeal it? Oh, no. No. Have we got it? Here it comes. I think. Well, while Techie's getting that up, the Labour Party have said it does not go far enough. They want to go further. The Labour Party, Lloyd. The Workers' Party don't think that's draconian enough. I think some things don't shock me. This one did.
Well, Roddy, maybe I'm just inured to this
More
to a
cynical.
greater degree than you. Nothing about the Labour Party since the advent of Blair particularly, nothing about them shocks me. West Streeting statements about opening the door to privatisation of the NHS, the fact that they whipped their people to vote against the ceasefire. This is... we're living in the 51st state. Whether the Tories are in charge or the Labour Party's in charge, this is the 51st state of the United States. That's all there is to it. It's the game's up, the game's over. It's one world capitalism spearheaded by the man who used to be the head of the Crown Prosecution Service, who locked up Julian Assange, who stated very clearly that he's a Zionist. All of these things, if I think back to the first election I paid attention to, which was Wilson's government, nobody who expressed any of these ideas would have got in the Labour Party, never mind into the Labour shadow cabinet, or be potential leaders of the future. But what we see here is, Britain, the client state. If your politicians, your senior politicians, no matter what party, and I include in that the Scottish National Party, if they are not seen as to sing the same tune as the State Department in the United States or sing the same tune as Whitehall, then you're not getting in power. That's all there is to it. That is the way the world has changed. And we can, howl at the moon and think back to the good old days of Wilson and honour and resigning if you did bad things. It's over. It's fixed. It's done. We now live in Hollywood politics. It's all about performance. It's all about, ticking the boxes so that you don't get leaned on by the mainstream media. Britain exists no more. As I said, it's the 51st state, and the sooner that people wake up to that, and particularly people in our country, and get the hell out of it, the better.
True. I mean, as the qualities often either, although the NHS is still under the control of the Scottish government, if this is implemented in England, it won't be long before it gets pushed into Scotland.
Well, we know in Scotland already that there are aspects of private care that the Scottish Government or the NHS are paying for. That's not news. I think the only thing we don't know is how much of the NHS budget is actually used for private services, because it's certainly there. But to go back to what Lloyd was saying about political parties and their evolution, it's very difficult to believe that Keir Starmer actually belongs to the same party as Harold Wilson, just like it's difficult to believe that the Tory party of Ted Heath is the Tory party of Rishi Sunak, and exactly the same thing has happened, unfortunately, in Scotland with the SNP. You could never, under any circumstances, have thought that Alex Salmond would have presided over a government which would have done many of the things that Nicola Sturgeon and... There's the dogs. It's got nothing to do with the mention of Sturgeon's name. You would never have thought that Alex Salmond would have allowed any of the things that Nicola Sturgeon or Humza Yousaf have permitted. So I say, in the context of the current Scottish Government, that you should rule nothing out. And if there is a Labour government, we know already that there are discussions likely to go on between the SNP and Labour at Westminster regarding the potential for, dare I say it, a Section 30. So the chances are that the SNP are hoping to be friends with a Labour government, and if they are, there will be a price to pay. There always is. So these are not happy times for anybody in politics, and in Scotland particularly, there's one answer and one answer alone, and it's get the hell out of there, because with the control of our own resources, our NHS would be fully funded, free to all at the point of need. And yes, it does sound a bit like utopia, but when you've got the resources that Scotland's got, it damn well should be utopia, because if it's not, it's because somebody's mismanaging it. As it is now, not only are we going to be ruled to an extent by, a minister for common sense, we've also got the dreadful sight of David Cameron created a life peer in the space of a couple of hours so that he could become the foreign minister. What the hell's going on? The UK is a laughing stock. If Scotland stays there, Scotland deserves the kicking that it's going to continue to get. So more than high time for the Scots to say, enough is enough. Let's walk. Time for a sharp exit.
Yep. In fact, when on his appointment, I sent a tweet out saying he was complaining about the boats crossing the channel. So perhaps if we stop bombing poorer countries and making them homeless, defenceless, and ruining their economy, the people wouldn't be trying to get into across the channel. That doesn't go into them. But the other big story of the week, two big stories in one, Yvonne, I've left it to last because we're running out of time. One was a 12.5% drop in the SNP vote in Motherwell by-election. Only 20% of people bothered to vote at all. But Labour have won the last few by-elections. And here's the thing, the big thing of the week was the SNP amendment for a ceasefire at Westminster. And it was defeated by 295 to 125 votes, including two Labour MPs who voted, the two Scottish Labour MPs, Shanks and Murray, who voted for to oppose any ceasefire. Now, you know, these guys who would have been getting elected and say, oh, I'm here for my people and for my constituents. Well, every constituency, I would suggest, in Scotland is against this war and wants a ceasefire. These people will just they've sold out to another country. They've sold out to the foreign policy of England. It was disgraceful that the Parliament didn't vote. But do we now, I just want to ask the question, the 295 who voted against the ceasefire, should they be dragged off to The Hague as war criminals complicit in a war crime?
Well, there should be, yes, but we know that they won't be. But there's a special place in hell reserved for Shanks and Murray and all of those who are dancing on the graves of Gaza's children. They are revolting men, and we must make them pay at the ballot box. You know, for goodness sake, Scotland's sleeping giant, which are the people, have got to wake up. We are not going to get independence because anytime we get near it, the Tories will change the law. And if Labour get in, they'll do the same. We are going to have to seize independence. We're going to have a revolution in this country. And if we don't stand up for ourselves, we will be crushed. Hopefully not like the people of Gaza, but we will be crushed. And, you know, don't forget that the people of Gaza should have been looking forward to untold riches now because of, and we covered this in a recent Prism, but Gaza has 1.7 billion barrels of oil in very shallow waters waiting to be taken. And of course, Israel, the land grabber, no different from what Westminster has done, actually. But Israel, the land grabber, is going to just plunder all of Gaza's natural resources and leave the people with nothing. And, you know, Scots have got to wake up. They've really got to wake up and realise that our wonderful energy-rich country is being looted and plundered. I mean, if somebody comes to burgle your house, you know, they creep in during the night, nobody's going to open the door and say, come on in. But we are, through Scottish Labour, we're saying, yes, come on up and help yourselves and take our wind, take our air, take our sea, take all our natural resources. You know, are we stupid? I don't think so. Well, no.
Well, I think we are.
Some of Scotland's greatest exports have been its people, great philosophers, philanthropists, thinkers. And it's like, what the hell is happening now? It's like a free-for-all from the robbers that are in Westminster, the likes of Rishi Sunak and all of his billionaire pals who got him into power. It's really, you know, we're living in very perilous times. And unless we rise up and take our independence, nobody's going to hand it on a plate to us. And, you know, I mean, Eva's right to point to David Cameron, you know, being made a lord. That's how quickly they can move things when it suits them. So if they can move that quickly to make David Cameron a Lord, they can move that quickly to give Scotland another referendum. And how will that come about? If we put the fear of God into them in Westminster, that's how it'll come about. And that's the only thing that they hate in Westminster, when people get organised, when people get mobilised, and when we put the fear of God into them. That's when they start to sit up and take notice. And we're going to have to do that.
Yeah. Phil, I'm ashamed to say that they voted against the ceasefire. The killing is just ridiculous. This has gone beyond anything of self-defence.
It needs to stop, and both Scottish Labours voted against this and supported the continuation of this genocide. Actions, not words, because as we saw in a Sarwar, he's saying that no, we're for the ceasefire. Well, as we've always said, actions, not words, and a Sarwar. I mean, it still amazes me when you think about it. Both Labour MPs in Scotland, there's only two, all the more remarkable since it doubled in the last by-election. But these two, so Anna Sarwar is lying. This is about if the people want peace, the MPs are doing what their parties tell them to vote for.
Mm-hmm.
That is whipped, and the leadership are controlled by the lobbyists. Yvonne is of course correct. We should vote for parties. We the people should vote for parties who hold policies that we believe in, and let the lobbyists vote for the parties that they're paying and buying off, and let the people outvote these lobbyists in our thousands and vote what's best for us. But it's getting that message over that matters. And this is all about remaking. For me, I'm looking at the performance. I'll come on to the performance of Alabama and the by-election as well. It's a very poor by-election. But this is all about, for me, remaking the SNP in its original mould, best developed under Alex Salmond, or breaking it now that it's been corrupted by Nicola Humza, Angus Robertson and their ilk. So you turn now to this Motherwell by-election. It was appalling turnout. 20%, 3,107 first preference votes. SNP continue to lose ground. Thank you, Nicola. You've again, and Humza, when your betrayal, you're destroying what is still deemed by many as the champions of Scottish independence, and sadly that is no longer the case. And if you analyse these results, you see that there was Mark Shields who get similar results to the Lib Dems, who used to be the third party. So that's I mean, you consider that it's not a bad achievement. But then you look at the clowns that are the Greens. They got a considerable vote. I mean, not inconsiderable vote. Rosa Zambinini. Well, anyone who understands what happened to a certain Aberdeen MSP will understand Rosa seems to be pushed forward now and a champion of this new SNP. I'm glad she didn't get in, to be completely honest with you. I don't think she's fit for the job. The winner by a distance was obviously Labour, and this is only going to continue. And it comes back to the same story time and time again since the recent demise of the SNP, since Nicola took over. It's the SNP in meltdown and the independence voters just not turning up.
Yeah, it's pretty bad, Lloyd, but the two things are connected and not connected. But the fact that the ceasefire it was voted down, I think is a stain on the whole country.
It's very much a stain on the country, but Roddy, let's apportion blame where blame should be apportioned. 3 members of the Scottish National Party group at Westminster did not vote for the ceasefire. Fergus Ewing was sacked and disciplined for not voting in a pro-SNP motion in the Scottish Parliament. I want to know what Humza Yousaf is going to do to Kirsten Oswald, Dave Dugan and Tommy Shepherd, all 3 of whom chose not to vote the other night. To me, it's a disgrace. It's beyond a disgrace. They should be expelled from the party. They have stood directly against the wishes of the people of this country, thousands of whom have taken to the streets day after day, night after night, right across the country for the past 2 weeks. Those three, for whatever reasons, and please tell us what your reasons were, those three betrayed those people. It's as simple and straightforward as that. And if Humza Yousaf does not have, despite his personal circumstances, the gumption, the leadership to take action against those three, then what little, and I mean little, respect I had for him just went down the pan.
Yeah, it's not just Humza, Eva. Also, Sarwar's got to surely, if he's saying that the policy of the British Labour Party in Scotland is to have a ceasefire, and his 2 MPs have voted for what Starmer said, and surely he's got to discipline his 2 MPs as well.
Well, you'd think that he would, but he won't. And we know why he won't, because his boss is Keir Starmer. So he can't do anything. Yes, he's a branch office. So British Labour in Scotland can't do anything without the approval of British Labour headquarters in England. That's just the way it is. The Labour Party in Scotland is not autonomous. It is not a separate party. It is not a Scottish party. It is a branch office of a British party, and it owes its allegiance to the British Labour Party and to the British state. Interestingly, what's happened to Kirsten Oswald today, she have lost her job as the SNP business convener, a position she's held for a few years. Apparently today the SNP NEC replaced her as business convener, and the person who's now got that job is, oddly enough perhaps, Angela Constance, the Cabinet Secretary for Justice. I don't really follow how that's happened. Anyway, where we've got to in politics in Scotland, a pretty shameful place, quite frankly. I agree and endorse wholeheartedly what Lloyd has said about the treatment of Fergus Ewing having to be called into question if others who disobeyed what must have been an instruction to vote for a ceasefire failed so to do, and have clearly not bothered to give their constituents any explanation as to why they were either not there or didn't bother to vote. Something that was so very crucial. It was just, the point of this motion was to send a signal to the world about the views and the beliefs of the people of Scotland, because I believe that the vast majority of the people of Scotland want to see a ceasefire. It's been ALBA policy from the outset. I actually can't think of any individual that I know in Scotland, within or out with the political bubble, that thinks that anything other than a ceasefire is appropriate, and an immediate ceasefire is long overdue. There are other matters that are clearly hugely controversial, but the deaths and the targeting, the wounding, the dreadful need and the horror visited upon civilians, innocents, men, women and children who are non-combatants, these are all war crimes that ought not to be happening. But in essence, Westminster's vote has enabled and probably encouraged those war criminals to continue on the path on which they are intent. It is not to say that this is one-sided. It is not. There are war criminals on both sides or on all sides. But what is known for sure is that the children of Gaza have been decimated as a result of this action. And for that, the entire world would hang their heads in shame.
Absolutely. My Christmas wish that we get ceasefires in both Gaza and in Ukraine. Lloyd, you wanted to say something else before we go?
Yes, sorry, Roddy. One of the criminals from the other night, I failed to name, the former Westminster leader of the Scottish National Party, Mr. Ian Blackford, did not vote.
He didn't want dragged out the bar, was that what it was, or something? I don't know. Didn't drag him out anywhere. It's disgraceful. So I pray that sense somewhere in the ceasefire and the killing stops, and it's just heartbreaking. So, ladies, gentlemen, thank you for your time. Viewers, thank you for watching us again and being here and supportive. We do appreciate it. There will not be a midweek show this week, but we will be back next weekend. And until then, may you and yours, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.